Hi everyone. So we're back for another episode of the Friday Floating. Today we're going to have Aideen, founder of themilkmam.ie, which is a great name. She's going to be coming on and chatting to me about the fourth trimester, breastfeeding, loads of good stuff. So I hope you're all excited to listen to it, learn from it. I know obviously for me as a pre and postnatal coach, it's going to be really interesting. There's going to be lots to learn, and her account's fantastic. And she's good friends with, she works with Sarah Murphy, who I had on as well a few chats back. So if anyone's interested in that as well, you can kind of scroll back or go onto my Instagram TV and you'll be able to find it there. So hopefully she'll come on and join now, and then we'll kick her off. I'll just see if I can invite her. Here. So I'm just waiting for Aideen to come on. Hopefully she'll click the link now and join. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the little chat box, and we'll try and answer them if at all possible. I know I've got a few questions lined up for myself, so we're going to kind of chat through fourth trimester. We're going to talk about breastfeeding. She did a great post earlier about I think it was on co-sleep, and she's got some FAQs up on her page about that. So we'll get cracking with that. Hi, great to see everyone coming in on this. I'll just send her another message. Perfect. Hi. So as I said, we'll be taking questions. I've got my coffee here, so if you guys have your tea, your coffee, we'll hopefully be kicking off soon. I know that Aideen's also a midwife as well. She's got loads of experience. She's, I think, pregnant with her second child, which is very exciting. She did a post there the other day about 28 weeks, what to expect, all that kind of stuff. So she's going to be through it once herself before and is going to go through it now as well. So perfect. Brilliant. Hello, here she is. Brilliant. Here we go. Hi Aideen, how are you?
Hi Sinead, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. I might be a midwife and a lactation consultant, but I'm a technophobe.
That's okay, that's no problem. It's like I just send you a message. Thanks so much for coming on. It's great. It's great to have you on to chat. We already had a couple of people join there, so
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be kind of questions coming through as well. But
Great.
yeah, so I just wanted, I guess, to kind of let you to kind of introduce yourself, tell everyone a little bit about you, kind of your background, and if you want a little bit about the milkman as well.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
So Aideen O'Sullivan is my name, and my background originally was nursing, predominantly intensive care nursing. So I worked in a big Dublin hospital for about 8 years doing that. And then I moved from that onto a GP practice, and it was there where I came in contact with loads of mums and babies, and I felt ill-equipped to answer a lot of their questions. They weren't always feeding related questions. They could be anything: antenatal, postnatal, mental health issues, loads of stuff to do with being a new mum. And I suppose since I was a little girl, I always had an interest in pregnancy and babies and motherhood, and I always wanted to be a mother myself. So I decided to take the leap then from that practice nursing job into training to be a midwife. So I've been doing that a number of years now, and through that then I moved into lactation consultancy then as well, because
Brilliant.
again, it's an area that there isn't enough support in, and I think we all know that in Ireland there's very limited government funding for free support. There's amazing support groups, which are group support, but a lot of women need one-to-one specialist advice, particularly after they go home with the baby and all that hospital support is gone. So I moved into that. I still work as a midwife, and then I set up the milkmam.ie, which is lactation support primarily, but it's for antenatal classes to prepare women and families for having a baby coming into the home, and then for postnatal support then as well. So I do that also.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And do you see, are there like common questions that come up when it comes in relation particularly to lactation, or, you know, are there kind of, I guess, I'm not going to say top tips, but you know what I mean, kind of what your most common advice that you see are the most common questions that you see coming through from your clients or from people you might have dealt with as a midwife?
Yeah, I suppose I would love to get pregnant women more involved during their pregnancy, because a lot of questions that come up from the minute the baby's born are things that women often say, oh, I wish I had looked into this sooner. Things like just latching the baby onto the breast, having nipple pain, positioning for breastfeeding, and the actual physical toll that having just given birth takes on your body. And then in addition to that, you're trying to learn something entirely new that you've never done before. And yes, it's a biological and physiological process that women's bodies are amazing, and they are well equipped by and large, 99% of the time. They're well equipped to provide for their baby in that sense. And a baby as well is born with that innate ability to breastfeed, but it doesn't take off just from the get-go, easy peasy, baby latches on, all done, happy days. It takes a lot of practice for first-time mums and for the baby as well, because the baby is very immature when they're newly born. So they take practice too, and it does take it takes a village anyway to raise a baby, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You need support. No, I don't think anybody could do it by themselves. I mean, when I had my first, I was a qualified nurse, midwife, qualified lactation consultant, and I still took help. So, you know, that kind of says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think sometimes, and you know, obviously I haven't been through the experience myself, but you kind of see it come out on social media in some of the accounts I follow, and I think firstly it's great that people are being more vocal about it, just kind of sharing that whole experience of being a new mom and the good with the bad. You know, I think a lot of times that sort of imagery is everything's going swimmingly, and sorry, for some people it really does and there's no issues, but for a lot of people it's a challenge. It's very new. There's kind of that loss of identity, or kind of development of a new identity and everything, but discussing the difficulties around that and having the kind of the acceptance that, okay, you might have been independent before, but now actually you're doing this whole new job that actually takes a lot of support from different people. And just because, as you said, it's something that we're biologically, for the most part, equipped to do, doesn't necessarily make sense that it's going to be straight off the bat, no issues. It's all very straightforward. So no, I think it's great. And like you mentioned there about more pregnant, or women who are kind of pregnant looking into a little bit more, what would you advise women who are currently pregnant to kind of learn a little bit more about, or what would you kind of typically end up telling them or advising them?
Yeah, I love to get in and have the conversation with women who are pregnant about taking the focus off that end point, that 38 to 42 weeks of pregnancy, where there's so much focus on the birth. And for good reason as well. That's something that a first-time mum in particular has never done before, has no idea how this is going to work out. And there's a lot of anxiety and fear at times around it. And then there's a lot of positivity as well, and just that kind of apprehension of wondering how it's going to go. But there's a massive amount of emphasis and just thought that goes into that particular time frame. And there isn't at all enough thought that goes into that first day of having a baby and being a new mum and being a parent with your partner, which you've never done before. Now I say this, I suppose a lot of my business does focus on first time mums, but I mean, people who've been parents before, they still have their own issues and challenges going into a second parenthood. So I mean, I see it all, but I love to focus women in pregnancy on basically looking beyond the birth, and looking at the basics of like what you're interested in yourself and what you preach. And it's amazing is trying to keep fit, trying to keep well nourished in pregnancy, and that really carries on through your labor and whatever form of delivery a woman has. It benefits her massively if she's well nourished and she's in some way fit for the process and then going forward, because the race doesn't stop at the delivery, it just goes on and on and on.
I can imagine.
I say to a lot of women, like when they on the day that they have their baby, or it might take a couple of days in the lead up to have their baby, your body is running a marathon. So, you know, if anybody's run a marathon before, done a triathlon or any kind of endurance race, they know that, you know, it takes, in my experience, I mean, I've done loads of triathlons, it takes a good week for your body to recover from that. And throw into the mix, trying to breastfeed and, you know, sleep deprivation and having a newborn, and all of a sudden being like, whoa, this is a new role for me that I've never done before. That recovery from that marathon is more difficult, I suppose, to do if you haven't kind of optimized your health during the pregnancy. So I'd be a big promoter of that.
No, it's interesting to see like the more and more kind of research coming out about that, you know, about kind of even things like reduced labor times depending on kind of like cardiovascular fitness and all this kind of stuff. And even anecdotally from kind of some of the women I talk about, they are just like, you can just go on for ages, you know what I mean? So it's that endurance, I guess, and kind of that mental preparation as well for what you can try to expect. Obviously you can never plan for everything, and you know, I've never gone through that experience, so I can only kind of try to educate myself about the best that I can. So you know, you won't fully understand what that is until you've been through it yourself. But that kind of leads me on to the next question. So I saw you posted up as well about kind of the 28 weeks and everything. So you have one child, and I know you're pregnant at the moment. So how are you finding that in comparison to the first time around with toddler in tow?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit more tiring. For me, it's much the same pregnancy as last time in terms of how my body feels. I'd be a fairly fit and active person, so I had a short window of 11 months of recovery after having my first, and getting my physical strength and energy back to pre-pregnancy state. And I'm expecting number 2 now, 28 weeks, and my little man is 15 months now at the moment, so he's running around like a mad joke. And you know, he requires a certain amount of lifting, but thankfully in the last month or so, not too much. I have pelvic girdle pain, which a lot of women experience in pregnancy, and that has limited what I can do exercise-wise in the pregnancy. I kind of am limited to Pilates and yoga now. Walking is limited. Obviously, running is totally out. And swimming is out because all the pools are closed.
I know.
So all the things that
I remember
benefit.
Exactly, to like change all the recommendations. I'm like, normally I would tell you to go swimming, but obviously we can't do that. So.
Swimming is amazing, and I suppose I could jump into the icy cold sea, but I'm using I was using the 5K limit restriction as an excuse.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't have that excuse anymore, so I better head off.
I know. I'm the same. I'm definitely a fair weather swimmer. I'm like, there's not that many beaches within my 5K, so yeah. I saw as well that you were kind of posting up about the fourth trimester, so that's really interesting. And again, it's something that people are starting to talk about more and more. But do you kind of want to explain what that is for people who might be listening who haven't really heard of the term before?
Okay, it's a term that gets bandied around, and it's not an official term, but I wholeheartedly believe in it. Since becoming a mother, more or less, I'd heard about it before that. And I knew to a certain extent that, like I had said, you know, the woman's body takes a good bit of recovery from giving birth and from pregnancy, and everything is going back in some way to how it had been, you know, all that relaxin hormone that was loosening all the joints and loosening all the muscles reduces down, and everything kind of starts to tighten up in those first few months after having a baby. But there's a lot more to the fourth trimester than that, and it's a really intense time, and it's a time that I really appreciate now in the last couple of years of how interconnected mum and baby are. And not only just that, like, I don't mean to exclude dads at all, or partners,
Hmm.
because they have a massive role to play as well. It, like I said, it takes a village to raise a baby, and it is, and it's an intensive time because a newborn, and I touched on it initially there, a newborn is born immature. A human baby is born immature in comparison to other mammals. So
Hmm.
once the a human baby head has reached a certain size, it's time for it to be born, because human women can't accommodate any bigger a head,
Yeah.
and we don't want to. But for that reason, the humans are a little bit more immature than other mammals. You know, if you see on a documentary a giraffe or a camel or whatever being born, they immediately are walking.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
They're up about, bit
yeah,
wobbly, but like they're good to
yeah,
go. Yeah.
exactly. Human babies are 100% reliant on their parent, be that mum or
Mm.
dad. And they're reliant on that physiologically, really interestingly. They're reliant on that for a heat source to help them maintain and regulate their heat, because their brain isn't fully developed yet to do that.
Mm.
And as well as that, for their breathing, it regulates their breathing. If they're close to their parent and they can hear their parents breathing and feel it, it actually,
Okay.
it promotes the baby to breathe at a more relaxed rate, and also to remember to breathe, because they
Okay.
they aren't yet mature enough to um always remember to breathe. And that's why we don't like little babies in the first couple of months to go into really deep sleep. And
Mm.
that's why the fourth trimester is intense for parents, because baby wants closeness. And like I say,
Yeah.
for temperature regulation, breathing regulation, and heart rate regulation, and they really rely on that. And then for comfort as well, they're learning how to bond with you, and you're learning how to bond with them. I do hear it thrown around a lot that you bond with your baby as soon as it's born, and
Mm.
some people might feel that. I didn't, and I know a lot of women who go, what is this being that I have just given birth to, and
Yeah.
I now need to care for 24/7. So
Mm.
it's really intense, and it takes a while for that bonding to kind of to grow. So that fourth trimester is basically like an extension of the pregnancy, in short. And I suppose in and around 12 to 14 weeks, that's that time when that baby is really getting to know you, and you're getting to know
Yeah.
them, and you're connecting. And also the baby is maturing and learning to become a little bit more independent as the months go on.
Okay. And what would be your advice for women about how to look after themselves in that fourth trimester? I know you kind of mentioned
Yeah.
the it takes a village to raise a baby, but is there anything else that you typically recommend?
Yeah, well, I suppose we touched on having realistic expectations during the
Mm.
pregnancy, and whether a woman plans to breastfeed or not, doesn't matter. Obviously, breast is best. We love breast milk. Babies love breast milk.
Mm.
It's what they're designed to have, and it's the most nutritionally appropriate for a newborn. But regardless of the method of feeding, mum and baby are like this for that trimester period. And like I say, it's an intense period where the mother and her partner need extra help often. So what's very useful in that period of time is just to accept help. And that's what's really difficult at the moment. And it's part of the reason why I set up the Milkman, because since COVID broke out, and I had a maternity leave through COVID lockdown,
Mm.
you can't have that support into your home. It's really
Yeah.
difficult. And social media can be helpful in some ways, and it can be anxiety provoking in other ways.
Yeah.
Especially like you were saying, if you're seeing all these, ideal looking mothers and parents flying it, and you're at home going, oh God, I wish somebody would just
Yeah.
hold this child for me for a while.
Yeah. So I
I
can go have
was
a
that
shower
mom.
or go to the bathroom or whatever it might
Exactly.
be.
And they
Yeah.
scream like they do. They don't like lying flat. They don't like being
Yeah.
left alone. And that's their need to just be close to their parent, or, a competent adult, to
Yeah.
just give them that warmth and that comfort while you go and just have a little breather.
Yeah. It's funny as well because like it's changed so much. Like I'm pretty sure when we were younger, like it wasn't. it wasn't something that you really did or that was kind of talked about at all.
Mm,
Like I don't think when I was born there was any kind of discussions around that kind of fourth trimester, or that period of, you know, making sure that it helps regulate. And maybe I'm wrong, but you know, it kind of seems like it's something that's been more and more researched with regards to the
yeah,
benefits of having that period of kind of support, and how, I guess, dependent the babies are
yeah,
on their parent or
yeah,
whoever is kind of looking after them, that kind of skin to skin contact and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Um, I saw as well that I think it was on your website you'd spoken a bit about the co-sleeping. Do
Yeah,
you kind of do anything about that within the consultations?
I do. I mean, there's very few parents, I believe, alive who will say that they've never had their baby in their bed with them at any point in
Mm,
time. And I suppose I believe in being prepared for it. You don't have to plan for it. If you don't want to do
yeah,
it, that's absolutely fine. But it's better to be prepared to co-sleep with your baby in a safe manner rather than it happening haphazardly when everybody is massively sleep deprived in the first week, the second week, the 12th week of the baby being around,
mm,
and it accidentally happening where mum and or baby and dad or baby and granny or baby and mum fall asleep on the couch, and that's not safe.
yeah,
So I mean, the KGC recommendations are that a baby shares a room with their parents, and
yeah,
that is so that, like I was saying, that the baby ideally doesn't go into too deep of a sleep. So every individual in that room sleeps a little bit lighter because you can, like if you share the room with anybody, you can hear their breathing sounds and you're aware of movements and things like that, and everybody's just a tiny bit, little bit more alert, and
yeah.
that's a safe thing for baby. Um,
Okay.
breastfeeding mothers, um, breastfeeding is a 24/7 job. Feeding a newborn is a 24/7 job, whether you're bottle or breastfeeding.
Hmm.
It takes its toll getting out of the bed multiple times a night, and particularly if you are breastfeeding, obviously, it falls on the breastfeeding mother to get out of
Yeah.
the bed all those times. So babies often end up in the bed as a result, and there's loads of research and data to back up that that is a safe thing to do as long as those
Okay.
instructions are followed in terms of safe sleeping. Um, a breastfeeding mother is so alert to her baby that she doesn't go into a deep sleep. She's very aware of her baby being there beside her. Um, and it allows the baby to go on and off the breast, sometimes hourly, some 1 to 2 hourly in that fourth trimester.
Yeah.
It promotes sleep for both mum and baby by them being together, because baby can go on and off, maybe go on for 3 minutes and have an hour's rest and then go back on again for 5 minutes or something. Um, Mum gets a lot more sleep doing that than getting in and out of the bed a lot. And
Okay.
breastfeeding rates improve when women and babies sleep together like that, because your milk supply is facilitated by letting the baby responsibly feed. And
Okay.
responsibly feeding is basically letting the baby have milk whenever they want it. And depending on growth spurts, that might be 12, 14 times in a 24-hour period, and then maybe back
Hmm.
down to 8 times in a 24-hour period when they're not having a growth spurt. So it's a
Okay. It's
24/7
quite a, I
role.
was gonna say it's quite a difference as well.
Yeah,
30 to 8, like that's significant.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, see, I can understand why how it's a 24/7. And I think
yeah.
that kind of nicely leads into I guess the breastfeeding side of things and the lactation work that you do. Kind of what are the common things that people didn't know about going into it, or maybe the common aspects of breastfeeding that people struggle with once they're there?
Um, I suppose
Are there any common ones, I guess? That's probably the first question, or is it different for every person?
when I'm working in the hospital with mums and babies are up to 5 days old,
Mm,
and it's a first time mum, baby is very sleepy for the first 24 hours usually, and then all of a sudden they get really alert and they really want to breastfeed a lot, and they're doing that for a
okay.
very good reason. They have energy to build back up after having a tough labour and a birth themselves, and
Yeah.
they need to bring in mum's milk supply, and in order to do that they need to suckle little and often. And that's how her brain knows, oh right, I need to start producing now. So I suppose first time mums, it's preparing them for that expectation of what is the
Yeah.
baby going to be looking for in those early days and weeks, and how am I going to cope with this. So I try and just prepare women for that, to know that it's not going to be forever, that I think, if you're going to run a marathon, it's useful to know that you need to have broken in your runners and have the right socks on, and you might get blisters and things like that. If you know that in advance, you can prepare for it, and you can mentally prepare for it. So the same goes for breastfeeding a baby, really. Is if you have an idea that, right, this baby is going to really, really want to be attached to my chest in some way, shape or form, almost 24/7 in those early days and those early weeks, then managing that expectation, I think, is helpful for mums.
Yeah.
So I would see that a lot. I would see first time mums in those early days going, God, like, why is that baby giving me cues that they want to feed again? I only fed 2 hours ago. And we need to just rewrite that whole schedule that's come into, I've put it in a post before as well, it's come into Western society because women are working outside of the home much more, I know, COVID aside, and they're busy, and they work 9 to 5 or 8 to 10 or whatever. They do big hours and they're out, and then they come home, and we're cultured into thinking that a newborn can be, what's the word, routinized, basically. That
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the books and a lot of the government health and websites and nutrition websites say they bandy around that babies feed 3 to 4 hourly, and then people get it into their heads that, right, that's 8 feeds in 24 hours. I'm not doing any more than that. That's what's required, and that's what the schedule is, and that's not the schedule with a newborn, be they bottle or breastfed. Like I said, because the growth spurts, they have different needs on different days and different weeks, and that's why responsive feeding is the best thing for you and the best thing for baby. Because if baby is happy and getting what they want, mum gets some rest, parents get some rest, and they have a baby that's thriving rather than a baby that's constantly irritated because they're going, hang on a second, I know I had a feed 3 hours ago, but I kind of wanted one again an hour ago because I'm trying to grow my little brain here and stuff, and I just want a little bit more frequent feeding today, but tomorrow I'll be fine, and I'll go back to 3 hourly, 4 hourly feeding maybe.
And just on the responsive feeding as well. So that's, again, just I guess for people who are listening, where you're kind of responding to the baby's cues that they want to feed, and kind of and I guess allowing them to feed and not necessarily kind of having to stick to that schedule that you spoke about. What are the kind of cues that you'd be looking for to, or is it just something that people tend to instinctively know? I know crying is one that's common, but are there more kind of subtle ones that people could look out for?
Certainly. There are subtle ones, and any parent will, I mean, there's no rule book that comes with any baby. You don't get a guide when they're born. And that's part of the bonding process, is learning what your baby's cues are and learning your baby as the unique individual that they are. So, I mean, all parents will figure that out as time goes on. But the general signs are, if the baby is rooting, we call it. So if they're showing signs of wanting to feed, they might be putting their hands up to their face, and their tongue and their mouth might be sticking out, and their face might be turning to the side, and that's where they're looking for a breast or whatever method of feeding they're having. But that's what their innate need to do, is to turn their head to the side. The tongue often goes out, the hands go up to the face, and they're usually quite alert, like they're looking around, they're trying to, their eyesight isn't great when they're newborns, so they're looking around for, this is why women's areola and their nipple is darker than the rest of the breast, because it's basically black.
It's a target.
A target. So those are the early signs, and that is why we encourage women to responsibly feed, and parents to responsibly feed. Even if you're bottle feeding and you see your baby doing that, you put more milk in the bottle, or you put the baby back on the breast, regardless of it having been 1 or 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours since the last feed, because they're telling you now, I want some food and I'm going to start roaring in 5 minutes if you don't give me some. And the difficulty in waiting until the baby starts screaming is it's harder to feed a baby then if they've already lost the rag. You have to put a bit of time into calming them and controlling them and just settling that heart rate down and settling their breathing down, calming them down, and then they'll go, okay, I'll have the feed now.
Yeah.
So learning those kind of early, real subtle little cues is really helpful.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, super. I think like that's all the kind of questions that I had, or the ones that kind of came in were kind of falling under that category as well. Is there anything else that you'd kind of give as like a last kind of parting piece of information for anyone who's either, you know, coming up to their due date or is kind of recently become a mother?
Yeah. Two things that are very kind of strong in my head, particularly at the moment, and because of my struggle at time as being a new mum, and particularly in those early days as a new mum. Firstly, I touched on keeping fit in pregnancy and trying to keep well. If you do decide to breastfeed or you want to try and breastfeed, it takes a lot of physical effort initially from mum, and it takes a little bit of background strength. And I thought I had a very strong back until maybe it's after years of nursing and midwifery that I don't have such a great back anymore. But I found breastfeeding and a newborn, because breastfeeding is such a repetitive thing in those early weeks, you can get a repetitive strain injury from it. So I try and prepare women for that in making sure that they're comfortable when they do start feeding the baby, making sure their shoulders are low, and then doing little gentle exercises to keep their shoulders and their back, particularly their upper back, nice and strong and supple and mobile, because that's really, really, really helpful. And then aside from the physical side of things, mentally, I'd be a big advocate of preparing women and managing those expectations for just the emotions that come with moving into parenthood. I suppose in today's society, there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot online, there's a lot of things coming at us, and some are great and some are not so great. And it can be quite a stressful time where women put a huge amount of pressure on themselves to be this perfect parent from the get-go, and you have a baby that sleeps and you're getting your body back and all this. And I try to just like pull it back a bit. Hang on a second. This is human nature. This is what you are physically able to do, is to grow a baby, give birth, have it. A bit of effort needs to go into preparing your head for that, and going easy on yourself, and taking help when it's offered, and being okay with that as well. And I spend a lot of time with women in the early weeks of being first time mums, of saying, would you just go easy on yourself, and don't beat yourself up if it's breastfeeding related. If you manage to breastfeed for a week, a month, a couple of months, whatever, never give yourself a hard time over it. You've always done your best. It's the most difficult job you're ever going to do. You don't really get any training for it, and all of a sudden it's just landed on your lap, quite literally. and women just give themselves such a hard time, thinking I need to just do this perfectly from the get-go, and that's just absolutely not right. All you need to do is love that baby and care for it, and feed it by whatever means necessary. So you take the help when you can.
Yeah, no, great advice. And even with the kind of strengthening aspect of it in the shoulders and stuff, like it's definitely something that I focus on in the classes, specifically with the new mums, but just kind of in that postnatal class in general, or the groups that I do, because it really does. And even during pregnancy, I'm like, we're just going to do curl to presses and opening up their shoulders. We're just going to get you as strong as possible, because you're going to be holding this baby and lifting it up and carrying it and bending over to pick it up out of the cot and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of building up, I guess, that resilience, or the strength there to be able to kind of manage that load, really, because the baby's going to grow fast. Like I was kind of saying this, I was like, if you're doing a squat with a baby, or picking the baby up, or kind of picking up by the cot, like it's good, like 8 kilos, you know what I mean? Like that's a kettlebell.
Exactly.
So
and how easy
it's
is
important
it to injure yourself with a kettlebell? Like
I know,
it only
exactly.
takes lifting it in a poor way once for you to injure yourself. So
Exactly. And I think we're conscious of it when we're doing it kettlebell, and we're not necessarily conscious when we're doing it half asleep, trying to pick the baby up out of a cot, or if they're crying in the kind of the rocker or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think it's great advice. And as well, that expectation thing, it's, as someone who would be quite driven myself, I'd imagine that that's something, if I didn't know about it, I'd struggle with straight away, being like, why can't I just do this? You know what I mean? But it seems to be something that comes up a lot for new mums as well. So I think that's brilliant. And then if someone wanted to kind of get in contact with you or find out more information, how they kind of go about doing that?
Yeah. So if anybody wants to get in contact with me for one-to-one support, be that for antenatal, postnatal, or breastfeeding, the email is aideen@themilkmam.ie. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook as themilkmam.ie. And there's a website there as well, www.themilkmam.ie.
Savage. Yeah, I love the name as well. I was saying it to my partner. He's like, that's hilarious. He's like, the milkman. I was like, yeah. It's like, not the milkman.
Yeah, I know. You have to be careful on Google.
I know.
It autocorrects to an N at the end, and you keep having to go back and put an N.
Yeah.
But anyway, I have to credit my husband actually with that one.
Yeah, that's fair. Credit where credit's due. But look, thanks so much, Aideen, for coming on. This was brilliant. For everyone who's listening, it's going to be saved on my Instagram account as well, so you can kind of watch it back, and I'll be definitely sharing it out with all my clients as well. So super. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And have a lovely weekend. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of come on and chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aideen. See ya. Bye.
Bye.